So I'm going to start off addressing all three. Can you start with describing a recent experience working with an indie band? Maybe starting with Kevin.
Actually, there's an indie artist here who I worked with, Ron Pope, sitting on the front here, who actually had a piano vocal demo up on iTunes that got a serious amount of downloads. And during that period, I got introduced to him through a mutual friend, and he ended up getting a singles deal on Universal. And maybe they had a modest budget, and they approached me about how they could maximize the budget. And so I put them in touch with, a drummer, a mastering engineer, a string arranger, checked out various studios that they could work at, and with the view that I would come in and mix it at the end. And so, in the world that we all inhabit these days, it's good to know that you can, if you have a great song, you pop it up in some digital environment, that there is a possibility that people will glob onto it and maybe gravitate towards it, and there is a possibility of getting a deal. And that's my most recent experience of working with somebody who's indie. But I've also worked with other indie artists who similar things. They make home records, and then suddenly they get picked up by a major label or an imprint, and you go back in and you remix the tracks. Mm-hmm. So,
great, Steve.
Are you two indie? I can't remember. No. Actually, I do those radio sessions here with you, and I do this radio thing called the Lillywhite sessions, and it's not a record, but it did get me thinking. The whole theory that about making records quickly, which is basically the Beatles fucked it up with Sgt. Pepper's, because they came in and they decided they would try and make a record without any ideas when they came in, and I thought, well, before Sgt. Pepper's there were great records made. So my whole theory was that you don't need to have a long time in a studio. What people do with lesser budgets, they tend to use a longer time in a cheaper place. But I think what you really should do is to use a wonderful facility like Avatar, but make sure you know what you're doing before you come in. And these radio sessions I did, which Brian at the back really helped me with on some of them, they sound better than the artist's records because they're done in a great studio after a band had been out and rehearsed and played live. Absolutely. And it got me thinking that that time doesn't equate to anything. You can, if you really know what you're doing and you make your record. You can make your. I'm not really making any sense. I'm sorry, but you can do it quickly.
Absolutely,
and yeah,
for sure.
It does make you understand, because I think people sit in front of their computer and there's no clock running. They don't see it as any sort of pressure, and I think great art can be made very quickly, and I think records. Doesn't matter how long it takes to make a record, as long as it doesn't sound like it took that long to make. That's the thing. And I like, because I think things have more of a timeless quality when they don't sound like they've been thought about too much. That's my theory.
Yeah, what inspires me about working that way is that if you go in knowing what you're going to do, and you already know how to play what you're going to play if you're a band, you already get in the studio, and then there's a certain sort of, when there's a clock running, not to say you should be nervous the whole time, but there's a certain sort of adrenaline that happens, happy accidents that happen with these performances, because since you already know the song and the arrangement, it seems to me you have a much better shot at capturing these things we call magic and really great moments, that instead of kind of hodgepodge through an arrangement that may not exist, or just throw a bunch of things to weed through later.
Yeah, I mean, that's our job, isn't it? Is to allow you guys to be creative and to not think, oh, this is a studio, to allow you the channels to be open so you can create your art.
Roy, do you have a recent indie experience?
Well, most of my recent indie experience has been mixing lately, because I get a lot of mixing stuff towards the end, but I'm in the middle of a singer-songwriter where I'm helping. She just has a new band now, and now putting her together with studios and other people to help get the project going. But that's mostly mixing up until this point, this year anyway.
This question is for Steve. Can you recall an instance in the studio when you had a sudden inspiration that led to substantial changes in a song that has since become something of a modern-day standard?
A specific thing that happened, like when you turn up the compressor and gate it or something like that. That's always good fun. I don't know. I'm sure there have been. But
Actually, I witnessed one that you did.
was it? Did you witness
Yeah,
one?
I
Oh,
witnessed one.
Kevin
Yeah,
will tell you.
actually, because I assisted Steve on a U2 record back in Dublin in '82, and on that song New Year's Day, Edge had just done the solo, and it was perfect time-wise, but it kind of felt like square, and you were like, oh, there's something about this that doesn't feel right. So you said, oh, let's just fly it off to the quarter-inch machine. So we flew the solo off to the quarter-inch machine. And then we said, well, let's just fly it back in more randomly and see what happens. And you just kept trying it. And then you flew it in this one particular spot, and it started like an eighth note early. So the first half of the solo actually starts an eighth note earlier than what he actually played it. And then it goes back into the regular time.
Right.
So it was like one of those things, and we all just went, bingo, that's fantastic, And Steve was like, oh, yeah, well, of course I meant to do that, And he probably did. But it was one of those great moments, just like...
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, this is for Kevin. What do you see as current production trends? Is lo-fi one of them? Do you see it sticking around?
No, I hope not. I've spent my whole career trying to make, and we were just having this conversation upstairs. It's so funny, like making records for 30 years. We've always had like a roadblock. You work in the studio, you make a great sounding recording, great performance, great production, and then you had to deal with the fact that vinyl didn't reproduce what you heard in your head, and then it was cassettes, which were crap sounding, and then you had first iteration of CDs, which were terrible, and then 7 or 8 years ago you had super audio CDs, which were really the closest you could get to a cloned master from what we hear in the studio, and then MP3s came out. So now there's always this reduced, like if our job is to record something as beautiful as you could possibly can, and beauty is relative, it's a relative term, what you consider beauty, the notion of making something lo-fi, if it's appropriate to the music, yeah, I'll do it, and I have done it in the past. But as a production aesthetic, I don't ascribe to that particular view.
Right. That's like saying there's a rule; it has to be like that,
Yeah.
and it does. There's no set way.